Our next conversation tonight is with Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser, who, as of today, is running for governor. Running for governor in 2026. That seems like a long way off, but it's not all that early. You've got 18 months to make your case to people. My first question: this is likely to be a crowded Democratic primary. What do you think you can uniquely offer voters?
My campaign's going to focus a lot on how I show up across all of Colorado. I've been, as a candidate, as Attorney General, to every county, and I show up and I listen. And I've gone to the San Luis Valley multiple times. Just today, Senator Cleve Simpson in the Valley says Phil Weiser shows up because he cares about us. He works to solve problems. I went there and learned about this opioid crisis from Robert Jackson, who was the sheriff and is the sheriff. And he said to me, 90% of the people in my jail, they're struggling with opioid, and they're addicted. I can't help them. What can you do? So I become Attorney General. I took on Big Pharma, Johnson & Johnson, Purdue Pharma, others. We brought back around $800 million to Colorado. We set up a nationally recognized framework, and last summer I joined Robert Jackson in Alamosa to open up a drug treatment center there. So what I have is a record of listening to people all across our state and getting results. That's on the opioid crisis, youth mental health, public safety, and more. That's what I'm going to focus on in this campaign.
So you're stressing that statewide approach. Republicans have not recently been competitive in statewide elections, but if you were to be the nominee and you were to be in the general election, they of course would say you're a Denver Boulder liberal, right? The same kind of thing they painted Jared Polis with. Why won't that label stick to you? Because there will be other people in the race who won't have that baggage.
They're Republican county commissioners, Republican sheriffs, voters across the state who know me, and they know that I care about them and I show up. And I don't show up just when it's election time. I've built relationships over years now, showing people not just that I listen, but I care and I can get results. I believe all across our state, I can compete for every vote. I was in Montezuma, this was July of 2021, talking about this opioid crisis. And the wife of the Republican Party came up to me, Ed, and said, Phil, I just might vote for you. That's my goal, to win every vote I can, everywhere, because I show up. And I do believe that we need a governor who cares about and knows about all of Colorado. I've shown that, and I'll continue to deliver.
Where we sit right now, what are Colorado's biggest problems today, in your view?
Affordability is what I hear again and again. There's so many people, teachers, firefighters, police officers, who can't afford to live in communities where they work. Pagosa Springs, for example. Housing prices have gone up. They're having trouble attracting law enforcement. People say, I can't afford to live there. People who are in Steamboat Springs and law enforcement, they've got to live all the way in Craig and commute. That's not safe because an emergency happens and you're living an hour away. This is a crisis for Colorado. We need a lot more housing. We have to build it, and there's a lot of ways we can do that. And also, there's some landlords who've taken advantage of people. I've sued RealPage, a company helping landlords fix and raise prices. That's hurting consumers. I went after another company who charged these junk fees, made-up fees, got $1 million back to consumers. So I'm going to work hard on these affordability issues. I've been working on them. Protecting our land, air, and water is also something top of mind. During this time of a changing climate, we're having droughts and challenges in the Colorado River that are historic. And the way we solve them is together. One of my worries is these quick solutions, like pipe water from the San Luis Valley to the Front Range and destroy that community's agriculture. It's not going to happen on my watch because we've got to solve these issues together in smart, effective ways. I've mentioned public safety before. It's an issue I'm concerned about. We need to recruit more law enforcement professionals, train them well, continue to go after guns that are getting in the wrong hands. And the youth mental health crisis is something that's also very much on my mind because young people are hurting.
I want to unpack some of what you said. We've got 18 months. We had a lot of time to talk about a lot of issues, but I want to unpack some of this stuff. Affordability, you highlighted as the top concern. I think a lot of other Coloradans would do that. Understand that you've gone after landlords as AG. But outside of that, when it comes to land use, housing, legislation, so forth, right, that's not your main skill set. You're a lawyer, you're an antitrust guy. Why hire you to solve that problem?
I would say, first and foremost, I'm a creative problem solver and an innovator. I want to give you an example, Kyle, which is exactly on this point. When I went to Southern Colorado, Trinidad, when I was first campaigning, people said, we've got a housing problem here. Dilapidated housing that no one wants to live in, drug users are living in it, and yet we need more good housing. What can you do? I said, let me see. So I become Attorney General. It turns out John Suthers had went after the big banks in the foreclosure mess. There's about $60 million he got for Colorado. I said, is any of that money left? The answer was $10 million was left. And I said, have we spent any of that $60 million south of Pueblo? The answer, no. The reason is a lot of times government is not just who's a Democrat or who's a Republican. It's whether you're on autopilot and inertia or whether you're an innovator. And I'm an innovator. So I said, we're creating a new program. So we've now worked with Lamar Community College, we've worked with Otero Community College, Pueblo Community College, and Trinidad State. And we built this program to train people to rehabilitate dilapidated housing, to bring more housing stock into use. That's an example of creative problem solving. That's the mindset I'll bring as governor.
And just to clear up one other thing, if a bunch of water rights holders in San Luis Valley want to sell water to a bunch of Republican power brokers in Douglas County, what does the governor have to do with that?
The governor, first of all, is overseeing water policy for the state. The governor helps set a tone for the state. And part of what Governor Hickenlooper did that was truly exceptional was he developed our water plan. And part of the water plan's fundamental tenets is we don't do those sorts of buy and dry schemes. That happened in Crowley County. I went there with John Stolp, one of my endorsers today, who's a former county commissioner, was Hickenlooper's water advisor. And John showed me in Crowley County and said, this is a poster child for how we don't do water. That community had twice, I think, the COVID rate or the overdose rate because they don't have enough jobs when they destroyed their agricultural economy. Half the people live there who lived there 40 years ago. We can't do that in Colorado. I will fight hard to protect all our rural communities.
And the state prison system is probably the biggest employer in that county now.
The two biggest employers are the private prison and the public prison.
Yeah. Your campaign announcement listed your top accomplishment as stopping the Kroger-Albertsons merger. But it was a lawsuit filed by the Washington Attorney General that got the permanent injunction. It was a lawsuit filed by a bunch of other attorneys general that got the temporary nationwide injunction out of Oregon. Is it fair for you to claim credit for stopping this merger? That was the work of other people.
It was a team effort, Kyle. I will be the first to admit that. I will say we got an injunction here in Colorado, a temporary injunction, because we made a showing to the judge that we're reasonably likely to win ultimately. It was going to be a race to the finish, which judge ruled first. Now, our judge didn't rule first, but the evidence that we developed here in Colorado is evidence that also helped the other cases, and vice versa. So it was a team effort. I also want to highlight our investigation turned up the fact that these two companies were colluding. They agreed not to recruit workers from one another, hurting workers' wages. They agreed not to solicit pharmacy customers from one another, hurting consumers. Those claims are still standing. I believe we're going to win on those claims. And those claims helped in the other cases, showing these two companies are each other's number one competitors. They shouldn't be allowed to merge.
That said, other states' attorneys general were way out in front of this when you were not. A bunch of them, I believe 6 or 7, sued in 2022. You didn't sue until 2024. Given that you were listing this literally as your top accomplishment, is it fair to claim credit for it when other states led the way on this and Colorado followed?
I'm not sure what 2022 case you're talking about, Kyle.
Out of California. California and a bunch of other states sued to stop Albertsons' shareholder disbursement.
We were part of that too.
You were not part of the original suit. There were 6 states, and it was not Colorado.
We filed what was an amicus brief in that suit. Mm-hmm. We were on board with them 100%. That was a separate case. And the issue in that case was important because Albertson said, we're going to give billions of dollars in dividends to our shareholders. And our response was, you're prejudging the merger because we don't want you turning around later to the merger and say we have to merge because we don't have enough money, having given out the money. So we were...
It was separate but connected because the relief sought was to hold up the merger until federal review, or to hold up the shareholder payment until the FTC review went through.
Correct. And then afterwards, and here's where I really did set a standard for state AGs, we did 19 town halls in Colorado. The Federal Trade Commissioner, the chairwoman, Lena Kahn, joined us for number 19. And at every one of those town halls, I had a basic question. What do the people of Colorado think about this merger? We took that information and we filed what is a tremendous complaint. And to be sure, it was part of a team effort. And I will tell you, as a state attorney general, lots of the work I've done on social media, suing Meta, for example, where we're leading that effort, or on opioids, we work as a team. And I'm proud of that teamwork.
So you talk about the work that you've done suing businesses for opioids and for consumer protection, so on and so forth. Would Colorado be a business-friendly state if you were governor?
This is a point I'm really glad you raised because when you look at my background, part of my leadership when I was at the University of Colorado is in founding Startup Colorado, bringing the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network Colorado, working with Governor Hickenlooper. I've helped create a startup environment. When you talk to leaders about what's happened over the last 25 years, people will say what Phil Weiser did in developing the Silicon Flatiron Center for Law, Technology, Entrepreneurship is part of what makes Colorado a better state to start a business. And I'm committed to that work. I was working with Bill Ritter as his Innovation Council chair when he was governor. We need to hold on to our business environment, and I'm committed to making sure this is a great place to start or build a business.
You're closely aligned with Democratic Governor Jared Polis on a lot of his priorities. I look back, it's tough to figure out places where you've publicly disagreed over the last 5+ years. Are there any of his top priorities that you don't share, things that he's emphasizing that you would de-emphasize or stop if you became governor?
I'm going to approach that from the converse, so it's another way to answer the same question, which is I've focused a lot on water and how we build more water infrastructure and prepare for this time of drought. And I focused a lot of effort on broadband, how we make sure we build broadband across our state, making available rights of way. So I'm really concerned about those issues for the future of Colorado. I would bring, in my view, a sense of real urgency to make sure we address those. That's something that I believe, if you look at governor to governor, there's a natural complementarity. There's a baton, if you will. So Governor Hickenlooper emphasized certain things. He handed the baton to Governor Polis. He emphasized different things. Then Governor Polis can hand the baton to me, and I can emphasize different things. That's part of how we in Colorado continue to improve on this great state.
That's a fair answer to the question. You're saying I would layer on to what he's doing these priorities.
Yes.
Question, though, is there anything that he's focused on that you think is not worth the state's time or is the wrong priority? And if there's nothing, there's nothing. I'm just curious, because people are going to ask how much of just a continuation would there be versus a change in direction?
I definitely am going to have different emphases. I've mentioned a couple areas. There, to me, is a really important area of youth mental health as well that's on my mind. That's something that I'm really concerned about this crisis. I think our next governor is going to have some deep challenges because we as a society are not in a great place. And
what do you do about youth mental health that's not being done now?
So let me start with what I'm doing as Attorney General, and I'll build on that because that's part of my thinking. We sued Juul and got $32 million back to Colorado by taking on them for their predatory practices. We're using that money right now to build school community partnerships so young people have more trusted relationships with people who care about them they can talk to. You look at the Healthy Kids survey, only 62% of Colorado kids say there's one person who they know they can talk to. That scares me. We are, in this pilot project, going to work to scale up a range of ways that young people can build better relationships. And some places that could be horse therapy, other places that could be after-school activities, other places it could be getting in retired folks to schools. We're going to learn from this, and then I want to scale that up for the whole state. Because if young people aren't healthy and they're not building good relationship skills, that's going to hurt us in our future. They're not going to be good employees. They're not going to be good citizens. They're not going to be happy.
A lot of what you're able to tout through your power as AG is getting these massive settlements and then dropping the money around the state to do things. When you're governor, your cash input's going to come from taxpayers, right? It's going to come from Coloradans, from business owners. Should it scare people that the way that you've gotten things done is by amassing these huge settlements, these cash, and then dropping it into places, right? I mean, that suggests if you just give me a boatload of money, I can do good things.
I want to highlight an important point by this. Let's look at how I've used that money. The opioid case is a really important one because that's the biggest pot of money, $800 million. That's a lot of money. So what did I do with that money? I sat down with local leaders. We developed a framework. 90% of that money is getting spent at the local and regional level. Every dollar that's being spent is transparent. It's reported. You can look at it, coag.gov/opioids. That's how I believe in governing, in a transparent way, in a collaborative way. When I talk about this school community partnerships, the money from Juul, we're giving this money out to school districts for them to use it. What I would say is that is how I will look to be as a governor, collaborative, problem solving from the bottom up, and looking at how we solve problems together, learn from one another. What does it mean in terms of where the money comes from? Yes, it's a different source. So Proposition 123 deals with housing. That's a lot of money that the state government can give out. I will look to give out that money, manage that money responsibly, transparently, as I have as Attorney General.
Another thing that you stressed in your campaign announcement was that you have stood up to Donald Trump on various occasions. Governor Polis right now seems to be going out of his way to find common ground with key players in the Trump world, whether that's Elon Musk, RFK Jr. Would that be your approach when Trump's president?
If there's a leader in the federal government who wants to work with me on helping life be better for Coloradans, I'm in. And I did that during the first Trump administration. If there are people in the federal government who are doing things that harm us in Colorado, whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, and what they're doing is a violation of the law, I'll stand up to them and I'll sue them.
So Donald Trump's made pretty clear who's on his team or who he wants to be on his team. Like Governor Polis, do you see people that you can work with, like an Elon Musk, like an RFK Jr.?
So Gail Slater is the new head of the antitrust division coming in. I don't know her personally, but I've heard really good things, very promising things that I can continue to work with her. We're suing Google together with the Department of Justice. I look forward to working with her. And the new chair of the Federal Trade Commission, former state AG official, I look forward to working with him. So I'm absolutely going to be committed to working collaboratively. Look at the first Trump administration, there were issues around robocalls. The chair of the Federal Communications Commission, Ajit Pai, is someone I worked with on robocalls. So yes, if I can work with someone to help Coloradans, I'm in.
You've described yourself in the past as Colorado's chief law enforcement officer, despite the fact that your office has a limited portfolio in which you're primary over things like white-collar crime, consumer protection, antitrust. Question, if you're the chief law enforcement officer in Colorado, is it fair for Coloradans to hold you responsible for the state of crime?
This is a picture that we have to have all the parts, which is to say, Colorado, like a whole bunch of states, saw crime go up during the pandemic, and that's been a national trend in red cities and blue cities. We have seen crime go down in the last year, 25% for violent crimes, 33% for auto thefts. What I would point people to is what's been my record? Investing in recruiting more law enforcement officers, improving training for the first time in 40 years, developing gun safety measures that we've pushed for in the legislature and defended in court, going after, as you note, crime rings, white-collar criminals, protecting victims of domestic violence. I've got a robust record on public safety. That's what people should judge me on.
How about violent crime, which often tends to be top of mind when people think about crime? Do you bear any responsibility for that as the self-described chief law enforcement officer of the state?
The challenge, obviously, is there's a lot of components to what contribute to the overall environment. A lot of them I won't, as Attorney General, have control over. Some of them as governor, you have control, many you don't. We all have got to do our part. Crime is a real challenge right now. And if all of us aren't asking, what can we do to reduce crime, we're not serving the people of Colorado. I'll keep doing that as Attorney General, and I'll do that as governor.
Could you briefly give me one thing that you would do to improve public safety in Colorado?
We need to get better at how we build a reentry system that works. Right now, half the people or so who leave prison to go back to communities end up back in prison having committed crimes within 3 years.
Far worse than a bunch of other states.
That's correct. We have to do a whole lot better. I started some pilot efforts here, and we need to focus smartly on how do we prevent crime. One of the best ways we can do that is help people get a job when they leave prison so they don't end up committing more crimes, end up back in prison.
President-elect Trump has promised to start the largest mass deportation in American history in Aurora. He's called for the deportation of all people here without documentation, whether or not they've committed a crime, starting with the people who have committed a crime. In your view, who should be deported? Who should be left alone?
Right now, there are people who've gone through the whole legal process, and they are ready to be deported. There's a backlog of people ready to be deported. They should be deported. There are people who are either in different stages of the legal process. They should not be deported without what lawyers would call due process. For us in Colorado, I think this is simple. We should be smart, we should be fair, we should be common sense. For someone who's a criminal, who's harmed people, they should be deported. For someone who petitioned for asylum and they didn't get it and they're unlisted to be deported, they should be deported. But for people here who are relatives, who are trusted community members, who are dreamers, it's wrong just to deport them and to violate due process.
Final question for you. Governor Polis has successfully held the line against a number of progressive priorities that have come out of the left end of your party. You appear to be a bit more friendly to progressives than Polis is. Are there undone priorities for the progressive left in Colorado that you would actively champion as governor?
I'm going to, during the course of this campaign, listen to everybody, and I'm going to be putting forward solutions on a range of issues. What I would say in terms of priorities I have that we haven't done is I want to see a voluntary service program for young people. I mentioned before youth mental health is top of mind. One of the ways I think we can help young people, give them a way to serve their communities, to find purpose greater than themselves. You graduate high school, become a police officer or a teacher or a nurse's aide in parts of our state that are unserved. For me, that's a priority that we haven't yet realized that I want to help spearhead as governor.
And is that something that would then rely partially on state funding, obviously, to complement whatever local resources there would be for that? What do you anticipate the funding stream for that would be?
We're going to have to figure that out. That's a very important question. How do we find the funding for it? How do we make it sustainable? I'm early stages in terms of how I'm going to develop this overall plan. I welcome people's ideas. Westmore is doing something like this in Maryland. I believe we need more service in our country, and this is a way to help people serve, and I believe make a huge impact in their lives and the communities they serve.
I presume you'd be talking about a voluntary program,
Correct.
not a mandatory program?
Correct.
All
Voluntary
right.
program.
Well, we've got 18 months to talk about all of these issues and more. AG Phil Weiser, thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure joining you.